Mira Business FM. The sound of success.
It's Mira Business FM. Good morning. Are you budgeting for survival is our question for the next half an hour or so. Or are you budgeting for growth? Maybe you're doing both. If you're asking yourself, am I ready for 2026? And this morning we're talking real money, real planning and real strategy. In other words, how to budget wisely and plan confidently for the year ahead. Financial expert Michele Carby is here to break down what planning for 2026 should look like. Even though we're a week in, there's no time like the present, I think. More importantly, she's also going to look at the steps we should be taking right now. And it is very nice to see you, Michele.
Hi, Tim. Thanks so much for having me back.
Very warm welcome to the studio. A happy New Year to you. It's still okay to wish you a happy New Year.
Of course it is.
Yeah, it's the 7th. So what's the cut-off date? I keep asking people this. Nobody has a set answer when you stop saying Happy New Year, and it's just hi.
It is. And
it's
then
around
I
the
think
10th, 12th maybe?
I'd have said 10th, 12th, something like that.
Yeah, okay. And we're coming to some kind of consensus, I suppose. How was your New Year? Everything good?
Very good, thank you. Thank you for asking.
Family happy?
Everybody's happy.
Okay.
The sun is shining, which is a good thing, right?
Yeah, kind of, I suppose. But maybe not for everybody because, we planned some of what we're going to talk to you about today at the end of the year. And it was as though we'd written this in 2025. So I've had to switch some of the questions around. But I did think this opening question kind of makes sense. For anybody who hasn't yet made a financial planning resolution for this year. What are we? January the 7th, when we're talking to you today. When should you start planning for 2026? Clearly, that's a rhetorical question because, it's now, isn't it?
It is. It's never too late, Tim. And I always say, start as you mean to go on. So it's never too late to stop, take stock of everything, sit down, give yourself 5 minutes and put a good, robust plan together.
Easy thing to put off, though, isn't it?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And it's something everybody does because, I think something people think about is they have time. And tomorrow becomes the next day. And before you know it, you're in July and you still haven't done it. And
I feel like you're describing my life. This is just the course of things. But this kind of came into focus yesterday because at the moment I'm doing a visa for my daughter, so sponsoring my daughter, right? Okay, because she's at university, but she's backwards and forwards. It's easy to have a visa. She can do other bits and pieces, have an Emirates ID, all that stuff. But I was going to do it before the end of the year, and it's now she needs to go back, so I need to get it done. So yesterday I had a whirlwind day of trying to do everything and got lots done. And I realised that it would have been much less stressful to do it when I originally planned to do it and managed to put it off. And it reminds me that financial planning is very like that. The only time to do it, to get on with it, is now.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're
Definitely.
even mouthing now when I...
Exactly. Not good radio to preempt what you're going to say, but absolutely. The benefit of planning early is huge because it gives you more choices, obviously less stress, as you mentioned, and you have potentially the opportunity of lower costs and therefore better opportunity, right?
Yeah, well, this is the thing, isn't it? Well, let me ask you this then. What kinds of financial mistakes do you see people making when they do what I've just outlined, the way I live my life, perhaps? But if you delay budgeting, what kinds of mistakes do people make?
I'm going to turn that question upside down a little bit, Tim, if I can, because I think one needs to, consider yourself. And if you are the main breadwinner in your family, you need to think about, and hopefully this is a motivation for people, is if you're the main breadwinner in your home, what happens to your family? More importantly, what happens to you if you haven't put those plans in place and you don't have a robust budget and you don't have, things to fall back on? And hopefully that's the motivator for people to sit up right now and pay attention and put some valuable time aside. Time is valuable, but put that valuable time aside to actually take stock of where you are right now and put plans in place that are going to help you with your budgeting, so that if the very worst had to happen, God forbid, then you do have a plan, you have a contingency, you've got, emergency funds to fall back on. There's a plan. And, people talk about the failure to plan and all that, but it's easier to do something proactively than it is to start planning in the rearview mirror with hindsight, because then you have less options.
Yeah, it is about sitting down and making time, isn't it? Just to take 5 minutes out of your day. The thing that is, I think, always really difficult is just facing it.
Absolutely. People like to put off these decisions because it doesn't feel nice. People like instant gratification, and there's no gratification in terms of sitting down and working out those numbers and looking at the budget, because that's boring stuff, isn't it?
Well, it is. This is the thing. There's nothing sexy about your finances. You could be off at the cinema or on a boat trip or whatever. You could be doing more interesting things. But there is another side to do it, to sort of get this across, I think, and I don't know how you do this, but it's certainly true. If you do it now, in 10 years or 15 years, you'll be able to look back with a great big pile of cash at the end of the rainbow. And I don't know how you incentivize people with that image or with that aim.
And you've said something very meaningful there, Tim. Don't think about the number of years ahead of you. Think about the number of paychecks. That's suddenly going to make you pay attention.
You've said that before, yeah.
Because,
I remember,
if you're young and you think, okay, I've got 30 years to retirement, for example, and why do I have to do it now? I can do it next year, or I can do it in 5 years' time. But, if you think about it, if you've got 30 years to retirement, that's only 360 paychecks. Each and every one of those paychecks needs to contribute to your retirement planning objective.
Yeah.
And so starting now is going to give you 360 opportunities to make a difference. So if you think of it that way, money is a great motivator for people. And the idea that you've only got 360 opportunities to make a difference for yourself and your family, that's definitely going to focus the mind.
Well, it is. And actually, it's this time catching up with you thing. The earlier you do it, the better it is, isn't it? But if you've worked 10 of those, let's say it's 30 years, it's 240. If you've worked 20, then it's 120. If you've worked 25, you've got 60 paychecks left. Assuming you work consistently and you get paid, every month for 30 years. So it really does start to catch up. It's quite a nice way to bring it in focus, actually. One of the things at the moment is we live in expensive times. It's an expensive city here, where we are in Dubai. Expensive if you're living in Abu Dhabi, wherever you are. I think that's the case. What should we all be prioritizing if we're putting together a budget for this year, or creating a financial plan?
I think when you're sitting down, Tim, something you really need to prioritize is being honest with yourself and making sure that you have a very good idea about what your income is, making sure that it's consistent, and then looking at those expenses and trying to drill down into those expenses. Are they all necessary? Are they at the best price points they can be? Are there things that you can be doing to reduce or eliminate some of those expenses? And then, more importantly, things like medical inflation, things you don't pay much attention to, those costs are rising too. So, your medical insurance is very important to make sure that you've got the best possible coverage you can within your budget, because if something happens to you and you've got to use your medical insurance, you want to make sure that it's going to cover you as best as it possibly can. Because the last thing you want to do is be on the back foot. And you don't have time then, if you're ill, if you've got a long-term illness, you can't work, your employer is going to be patient for a certain amount of time. You need to make sure that your various insurances, not just medical insurance, but things like life insurance, income protection, critical illness cover, you've got to make sure that all of these things are in place to look after you. And those are the silent options. Like you said earlier, they're perhaps not sexy, they're not going to illuminate the sky, but certainly they are going to make a difference if you need them.
It's true. The thing is, I'm sitting listening to you there, and I'm thinking there are points at which, if things are difficult, hard decisions need to be made, and it may be that sacrifices need to be made in a particular area. And I know people listening or watching thinking, well, there's nothing more I could cut, there's nothing more I could do, and I think you have to empathize with that when times are tough. But there are certainly times in your life when you think, well, no, I have to go without this, or it may be that, I don't know, a few years ago I got sick and I was driving a great big tank, basically, of a car, when it was costing a fortune in petrol and insurance and everything else. And I'd always sort of meant to buy a much more eco-friendly car. And I'd said to people, I'm going to do it one day, I'm going to do it. And then I thought, no, I actually have to do it now, because I'd had to stop working for a while and had to make that so-called sacrifice. In the end, actually, I've still got the eco-friendly car because I quite like it, but it costs next to nothing. But there are points for all of us, I think. You think it's never going to happen, but it does, unfortunately. And you have to make those sacrifices. And that I think, is a very hard thing that you have to face, because it's not really only about money. Many of our conversations are, you need to plan this, you need to do this. But it's much more, I think, in your job. And I think I've said this to you before. It's about understanding people and wants and needs, and trying to offer people a path. It's more of a psychological profession you're in, I think, in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, because you really need to drill down, like you said, Tim, and understand, the key reasons people do things, and the motivators, and the key objectives, and make sure that those are aligned with where they are today and where they want to go in the future. And it's easier for us because we're on the outside and we're looking at you, but and we are making suggestions or recommendations to you potentially as a client. And like you said, it is hard to make those sacrifices, but it's really meaningful, because in your example, it made a real difference to you. It was hard to do initially. And I always say to people, the first couple of months are going to be tough because you don't like those constraints. You don't like to cut back where you look around and everybody's having a great time. But at the end of the day, both yourself and your family will thank you for making those sacrifices, and it all pays off and it all becomes worth it, because in a couple of years' time, where you see your savings building up and the opportunity to do things that perhaps other people don't have or wish they had, that really does put a smile on your face, and you actually think, wow, it's worth it. And remember, your expenses don't stop because just because your salary does. So, again, just circling back to your example, Tim, when you were sick, your expenses continued. So you need to have all of those contingencies in place for the what if scenarios.
Yeah, you do. No, you really do. You got to try to get yourself into that position. I mean, one of the things I was going to put to you today was this: not everybody gets a monthly salary paid on a specific day every month. Not all of us work that way, of course. So how can you realistically budget if income is inconsistent or unpredictable. And I think that applies to a lot of people, particularly, now with, so many freelancers, people working in, the gig economy, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. And in your own business, because if you are starting off in your own business, that's also, starting from zero
Yeah.
in terms of income base. So it is important, and you've got to plan for the rainy days. So, if you do get a lump sum of money for a job that you did and you don't see the next paycheck on the horizon, you've got to make sure that, you break your expenses down week by week. You look at the money that you have, and you've got to obviously try and stretch that out as much as you possibly can. But it's making sure that you don't get that paycheck if you're in an inconsistent earning or starting up your own business. You've really got to prioritize your expenses, perhaps pay your rent up front for a period of months, pay your insurances up front for a period of months, and make sure that you're as slick as you possibly can be with those expenses and put money aside for those unforeseen expenses.
I'm just writing here. I'm doing a job at the moment, so leave Rolex waiting list. Don't need a new watch. Thank you very much. So I've learned something this morning, which is good. What's the biggest? This is a tricky question, I think. But what's the biggest myth that people believe about budgeting, and how can that be maybe more painful financially? Do you think?
It circles back to something we've just spoken about, Tim, and that's, people say, I have time, I can do it later. Um, that's definitely one of the biggest myths, and something we hear in our role all the time. People are great procrastinators, so they put off doing things that they should be doing today, and tomorrow for a lot of people never comes.
Yeah, thanks. That's once
Pleasure,
again,
Tim.
it's my life. You kind of mentioned small business owners, but this is kind of an extension of the budgeting question there. But if you're an entrepreneur or you own a small business, what should a 2026 financial plan include? Maybe that people kind of overlook.
A lot of people setting up their own businesses overlook their value. So, if I can put that into context, a founder led business. So, something that you started up yesterday, the value of that business is you. And what happens to your business, and more importantly, your family, if something happens to you? Because you're building your brand, you're the brains behind the operation, everything that happens and the value that you add to your business is built around the assumption that you're going to be there front and center of your business. Now, going back to your example, in the worst scenario, if ill health had to come into place and you were out of the picture for a couple of weeks or even a couple of months so that you could recuperate and have medical treatment, who's going to run your business? Your family can't step in and do that, but there are plans in place that you can do, and it's all about money. At the end of the day, sad but true, it is all about money.
Yeah.
You've got to ask yourself important questions. Who runs your business? Who pays your staff? Who looks after your family? And it's very important here in Dubai because it's certainly an economy built of business owners. And, it's so valuable to talk to people like myself who can guide you in these situations, and what insurances that you can wrap around yourself and wrap around your family that are going to, create a pot of money. God forbid the very worst thing had to happen. And then that money allows choices. It allows you to get your medical treatment that you deserve, so important. And it allows money for perhaps your family to hire somebody to do the job that you were doing and to keep the business running, to keep that brand moving forward, to keep it generating that valuable and more important income that when you recover, you can step back in, for example.
Well, it's a good point to make because these things do happen. And the other thing I was thinking there when you said that, you said it's so important to talk to somebody like myself. And that's not a self-promotional thing. The point I think you're making there is talk to somebody outside.
Yes.
Somebody who can be kind of dispassionate almost. If something, let's take ill health as the example, it does happen, but to have somebody that is outside looking in to advise, look, unfortunately, and this is what I learned, if you are ill, I thought the world stopped and everybody's like, oh, well, it's your time now. It doesn't work like that. Everything else keeps going. So it's keeping these things in mind. Very kind of practical, I suppose they're kind of life lessons, really.
Absolutely, Tim. And circling back to, talking to professionals like myself is, we've walked these streets. We have the experience where perhaps yourself, where you've had experience doing other things, may not be aware of all the solutions that you could potentially put in place to look after yourself, look after your business, look after your family in these situations.
Let me look at another side of and this is again, it's kind of, I have kind of small business owners and entrepreneurs in mind, but it's how you separate your personal finance and your business finance. And I think lots of people, there's overlap for a lot of people there, I think. And you can understand that, as small businesses and things collide. But how important is it to separate the two?
It's vitally important, Tim. If I think about in my own family, my father-in-law is a business owner in Dubai and has been here for 50 years running his own business. And when I read this question, I thought of him straight away because you can see that he's a small business owner and has 3 people in his business, but he's the main important person within it, making all the business dealings on a daily basis. And that's how he runs his business. He runs his business and he doesn't divide the two between personal and business. And the business supports the personal, it supports the family, it, makes the difference within his environment. And it's such a trap that people fall into because it's so easy to do because your bank account becomes the business bank account and the two intertwine. And it's really important, I think, for aspiring business owners and people in business today is to make that divide because you're perhaps missing out on opportunities. It's important to pay yourself a salary, for example. So if if you were the CEO of your own business, you've got to really sit down and take, stock of everything. And how do you want your business to run? Because a lot of people want to obviously scale up as quickly as they can and be professional from the first day. Try and pay yourself a salary, separate your business from your personal accounts, get an accountant or an external auditor, work with a tax consultant, especially if Dubai is not your end destination or if you're thinking of scaling your business. Tax consultants and auditors will pay you a great amount in dividends in the future just by having, their input, their advice, especially with how to set your business up and all the planning that goes into the grassroots, if you like, so that when you are scaling up and your business is exploding, you've got the right foundations in place.
It's that expense up front, isn't it? That it's hard to see the wood for the trees, I suppose, the savings down the line.
It is hard. It is hard, and I can understand that. But where tax is a consideration, especially with businesses now, even here in the Middle East with corporation tax, these people, when you have experts giving you guidance, you don't need them every day, but you could potentially work with them 2 or 3 times a year, just so that you pay them a professional fee from the outside looking in objectively, but also to give you guidance, because they can tell you how to take advantage of perhaps setting your business up correctly, what are allowable expenses and what are not. So actually, it'll probably save you a lot of money, although it's an upfront cost.
Yeah, you've got to keep that in mind, I guess. We're running out of time. I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. And I suppose these are both for this year. A couple of things here. Save, pay down debt, very important, of course. But the first thing I wanted to get to was a simple habit that can make a real difference when it comes to growing financially. I don't quite know how you acquire a habit. It's a hard thing, but I mean, it's a mindset, it's something you need to do. But is there one simple habit, do you think, if you want to grow financially, that you have to get through to yourself?
Pay yourself first.
Okay.
That's a great habit and a great mindset. So that's about saving. And I think we've spoken about it before, Tim, and it's really looking at a proportion of your income and saying, I've got to pay myself first. That goes into my savings part. And for a lot of people, we encourage, if you can and your budget allows, at least 20% of your income put aside for yourself, because most people who are coming from income tax paying jurisdictions, you would have been paying that away in tax previously anyway. So that's always a good place to start.
That seems sensible to me. Anybody looking at this, watching this, listening to this, if there was one action that they need to take, should take, could take from this conversation, what do you think it should be? Pay yourself first?
Pay yourself first is always
Sit yourself down, tell yourself off.
Absolutely. And be truthful to yourself.
Right.
And I think I've written a point down which I think would be quite useful to share with everybody. And if you think about this, before growth, returns, or lifestyle in 2026, protect the life, income, and business that makes everything else possible.
Okay. I feel like this is a really grown-up conversation. Do you know? It's
a 2026 conversation, Tim. We're being accountable and we're trying to be very grown up.
I like it. That's a good word, accountability.
It is.
You have to be accountable to yourself, don't you?
100%.
Okay. The face and the voice behind the Michele Carby practice, financial expert Michele Carby, here this morning. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks so much for the opportunity to make a difference for everyone this morning.
You're very welcome. It's good to see you. It's the Morning Drive. This is Mira Business FM. Like, subscribe wherever you find us. Get in touch as well. We would like to hear from you. Everything we do is available to watch and or listen again. Find us where you get your podcasts. Just search Mira Business FM.